What's up, everybody? Uncle Dad here, hanging out as always with the man, the myth, the legend, the tarot certified sexiest man in the world. Give it up for Mike Hampton. Mike, what's up?
Was it the world or just the podcast?
Well, now it's the world.
It's growing. I don't know if I agree with that, but okay.
Hey, the cards do not lie, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Mike, we have a very special show. We don't do these that often anymore, but I'm very excited that we're doing a show where you kind of take the reins. So I haven't said this in a long time. I'm going to toss you the keys. You're going to take control. Don't crash, my friend. Mike, without further ado, I will comment here and there. Please introduce our amazing, fabulous, astonishing guest that we have.
Wow.
That's
the accolade. Yeah. Thank you, Uncle Dad. Yes, I'm really excited to have, to introduce our guest. Known him for a long time. Seen him at the conventions. I would consider you somewhat of a friend. I hope that's okay, Scott.
Yes.
So yeah, we have, you're a cartoonist, you're an animator, you're a historian of comics, you're an Inkpot Award winner. Not to mention, I guess I should have led with this, a 4-time Emmy Award winner.
And I got the Sergio Award.
I could not. Look at that. Caps. Yes. Yes. Scott Shaw with the exclamation point. Welcome to our little show here. Thanks for coming on, Scott.
Thank you very much, Mike and Uncle Dad. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to you on here for some time, and you are a busy, busy man. And we're going to get to some of the things that you're up to right now. But just to let our audience know, like some of the stuff that you have worked on, and this is just some, because you've done a lot. The Flintstones, I'm sure everyone's heard of the Flintstones. I mean, you've worked on the Simpsons comics, Sonic the Hedgehog, the Muppet Babies cartoon, which was my favorite when I was a kid, the Fantastic Four, Popeye, Smurfs, Garfield and Friends, Yogi Bear. Those last two are also some of my favorite cartoons ever. And that's just some of the things that you've done. And so you're such a precisionist at the way you draw your cartoons. And you started at just such a young age growing up in San Diego, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you explain, just like I know as I read your book, which we'll get to later, but I'll show it to our audience here, Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories. This is a great book. But just give us a brief little, how did you start drawing as a kid? Because I think that's always interesting to me and to people.
Well, I was actually born in New York City, and my dad was in the Navy, and he drew for me before I could draw. I never realized at the time. I just thought, oh, my dad, he can do everything. But looking back, I think if he hadn't been at Pearl Harbor and then made almost immediately an officer, I think he would have gone back to Illinois and been a sign painter. So I would say by the time I was 4 or 5, I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist. I think most of the cartoonists I know, it's somehow in our DNA, and we know that as soon as we start seeing comic books. I remember asking my mom, because I was born in 51, and by 53, she was buying me comics. I said, Mom, were you trying to make me a juvenile delinquent? I'm referring to Frederick Worth's book about seduction of the innocent. The comics would turn your kids into maniacs. And she just rolled her eyes and she said, all I know is you really needed him bad, and like you're a pain in the ass. So, and I definitely, when I watched that Sheldon show, Young Sheldon, it's like me as a kid. I used to get pissed off if Fred Flintstone's tie was the wrong color. And we had a black and white TV, so I really did my research on that. But yeah, I was always drawing monsters, surfers, dinosaurs. By 6th grade, I was selling my art to my classmates, a nickel for a headshot and 8 cents for a full-length figure, because I could buy more comic books. Those were my textbooks. I never had any art classes. I was in a thing called the GATE program, which was supposedly for really smart kids. But what it really was back then was to get all the smart kids involved in science so we could kill the communists. I found that out many years later. So I never got any art classes in school. Even in college, I got a modeling class, but I was always adding gags to it, so I got a bad grade. I'd have like somebody giving the nudist lady a hot foot or something, or a stupid hat, or somebody sneaking up on her in the background. So yeah, I was doing for my junior high paper, high school paper. By then I was doing fanzines, had a full page every week in my college newspaper. I wondered why I got a scholarship, and then years later realized they wanted a cartoonist for their paper. There was no other reason. But by around, I don't know, 71, I think was my first sales with the Turd, a very famous or infamous character. And that was in Ken Kruger's Gory Stories Quarterly. John Pound was in there too, another friend of mine, and he created the Garbage Pail Kids. In fact, 5 of us from the same school, Crawford High, were co-creators of Comic-Con. It wasn't just me. We had the science fiction author Greg Bear, Roger Friedman, who's a scientist, Dave Clark, who's a artist and a poet, and John Pound, and me. And from that point on, I just started selling stuff. I think I had my first, I'll tell you, when the Flintstones came on the air, I leaned toward my TV. This was 1960. And I whispered to the TV set, that's what I'm going to do. 16 years later, I'm inking on the Flintstones comic book that Marvel was published. It was never my only goal, but I always wanted to work at Hanna-Barbera or Jay Ward. I actually got a letter once asking me if I wanted to intern at Jay Ward Studios. And I was in 11th grade in San Diego. My parents said, we'd love to do it, but we can't move just so you can have a job that doesn't pay anything. And I don't know where that letter is, but I forgot to take it up to LA with me and show up at Jay Ward and say, hey, I'm ready now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
you mentioned as an animator. I'm not really an animator. I'm kind of everything but, although I've done a little animation. I started out as a character designer and a layout guy. And then I became a storyboard guy. And then I became a producer director. So I worked for a number of different studios, as you mentioned, but Hanna-Barbera, Bill and Joe were very loyal, and I think were training me for that the whole time, because they knew how giddy I was about working there, and everybody else there, the old timers, were like, geez, these are the crappiest cartoons I've ever worked on. And I didn't care. It was like I was surrounded by brilliant cartoonists, and it was 10 times better than college, except for the sex and drugs, because I was surrounded by guys that wanted to teach me for free. It was like getting paid to learn. I'd never had that experience in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're doing already what you love to do. And it sounds like you manifested it into the TV at such a young age. And I was, looking online, and I knew you were one of the co-founders of Comic-Con, but I didn't realize all you guys went to the same school. So that's fun. Is that something you guys...
Actually, about half of the people that really made the difference. And we all wanted to be in the business. The other guys mostly were dealers and collectors. So I always thought that, I kind of brought the two groups together, but I always thought the chemistry of this is perfect. Neither side of us could have done it.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, and so Comic-Con, yeah, I want to talk about that a little, just because it's so interesting, because, now it's Comic-Con International, and it's the biggest comic convention in the world, right? And 130,000 attendees. I'm sure there's more people there than that. But when it first started, it was just like in a basement of a hotel, and it was Comic-Con State Comic-Con or something like that, right?
Yeah, because Shel Dorff, who was not the brightest man in the world, didn't think people knew where San Diego was, which is kind of ridiculous because it's a tourist town. And that's one of the things nobody ever mentions about Comic-Con. We kind of took it for granted because we all grew up there. The reason Comic-Con got bigger faster than any other show I've heard of was because probably Neil Adams was the guy that went back to New York and told everybody how nice we treated him, and how much fun it was to take his family, and how much he loved to tax deduct it. Suddenly, cartoonists were coming out on their own because they could be the hero. Their family are looking at the back of their heads all the time because they're bent over a board. And I think that had as much to do with the interest of other cartoonists that weren't in San Diego more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, Cartoonist, so I'm going to go to your book here. And this is from a 1975 Comic Con. I'm just going to read you a few of the guests that were at this, and listen to these names: Stan Lee, Ray Bradbury, Will Eisner, Jack Kirby, Chuck Jones, Vaughn Bode, Steranko, Gil Kane, Jim Starlin, Tex Avery. And these are mostly comic book artists. Russ Manning. I mean, I could go on, but like amazing artists all in one place.
I just had like the
The
huge.
thing about that was Vaughn Bode never made it to the show.
Oh no.
Yeah, he died about a month before. Yeah.
Of all the names I picked to read, I picked one of the guys who died before the show. Just my luck. But yes, I mean, so when you're co-founding it, and how long are you part of that, like of the workforce, I guess, or of that?
I was helping out the show for a long time, but I moved to Los Angeles in 1976 because I was still had to have a regular job and being a cartoonist on the side. And everybody in San Diego knew me, Jim Cornelius, Rick Geary, John Pound. There were about a half dozen of us that people knew who we were and what we did, but it still wasn't for any of us to live on. So I figured I better get up to LA. I'd already interviewed with Hanna-Barbera. And as soon as I got up there, I planned this before. A friend of mine who I'd met at the very first Comic Con he and his partner had two comic book stores. Then it went up to 3. So I thought, well, this is perfect because the one I stayed in was about 3 miles away from Hanna-Barbera. And I had lots of people from Cartoonist and Roy Thomas and Steve Gerber and Bob Asshole Kane. A lot of people were there. Boy, was Bob an asshole. I won't even go into it. But anyway, it was a great place to make connections with people, as was Comic-Con. And that's, I think, when I got hired for my first mainstream job was Roy Thomas for that issue of What If, where I did the origin of Spider-Man in reverse. I think it was called What If a Radioactive Human Bit a Spider? And he was Man-Spider.
Oh.
And Marvel obviously liked it, but since I'd wrote it, drew it, and inked it, they were worried that I might sue them, so that's how they created Spider-Ham instead.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been screwed by almost every company I've ever worked for.
I mean, that's kind of how the industry goes, right?
I tell this to kids now all the time. I said, maybe, unless you have really thick skin, maybe you don't want to be in this job.
You do have to have really thick skin. It's, it is oddly enough, as it is fun because you're drawing cartoons and comics, it is very cutthroat, and there is a lot of things like that going on, or people suing people, or people stealing ideas, or whatever. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I guess any industry is going to have that. Comics and cartoons aren't going to be safe.
I had 2 Filmation studios over a character they stole from me. And I did that while juggling a lawsuit from my ex-wife. And when people ask me, why don't I sue other people that they know I've been screwed by, I go, that sucks the life out of you. I couldn't do it again. Just the anxiety of it would kill me.
Yeah, it's almost just like just live and let go or die or whatever the phrase is, right? Yeah.
Or make T-shirts that say, fuck you, Warner Brothers, like I've done.
Do you have any of those left?
That gets kids asking questions, believe me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you also have been doing at Comic-Con, at panels, and not just there, all over, is Oddball Comics, where you take old comic books covers that are odd and you talk about them. And I remember this very distinctively watching one that you did for the Comic-Con at home during COVID time about all the Batman covers, where they would fight these. They were so weird, and I remember seeing these in like Silver Age bins back when I was bagging and boarding and helping Steve Wyatt sell comics. Like they're fighting for some reason Batman and Robin are fighting a huge floating hand, or Bat Hound who's shooting flames out of his mouth, or the ones where Robin's always in the corner. And so what got you started doing the Oddball Comics discussions?
Well, because those are the comics I liked the most when I was a kid. You know how it was they always had all the dinosaurs on the covers or gorillas on the covers? I'd buy, if I had the money or I could make the money, that's what I was buying, dinosaurs and gorillas. My favorite series before I started reading Jack Kirby stuff was Kona, Monarch of Monster Isle by Sam Glanzman, about a Cro-Magnon caveman with a submachine gun. What 9-year-old boy doesn't want to see that? And he's going after dinosaurs and monsters and giant ants and all kinds of stuff. The other was called Bats, which was a Archie's Lift of Mad Magazine completely. But they had a cartoonist that was a big influence on me named Orlando Bucino. And he kind of drew like, what if Mort Walker, the guy that created Beetle Bailey, had worked together with Jack Davis. And it was like real cartoony, but real monstery at the same time. I mean, those are books that neither of you have ever heard of, but for me, those were really oddball comics in the first place. I also really loved the Bizarros and adventure comics. And when they threw them out and put in the League of Super, or what was it called? All the teenager kids, the Legion of Superheroes. Legion of Superheroes. And even as a kid, I'm thinking, no teenager is going to call himself Lightning Lad. These are old men coming up with these ideas. It really pissed me off. I still didn't. I've never liked that. Just for why did you get rid of Bizarro?
I don't know. I think Uncle Dad might call himself Lightning Lad in that shirt he's got on today.
Dang, I'm not even saying anything, and you got me. Okay. I want to say this though. I love what Scott says about Lightning Lad, because I tell you this, I 100% agree. I never liked that name.
So Oddball Comics, so you've done them all over the country and different comics and Comic Cons and panels and such. And you have like I guess it's a new deal with this website, 13th Dimension, where you're going to do Oddball Comics with them. Is it like once a week or what? Yeah, talk about that.
I'll have a new one or maybe even a group of ones. And I do one on Facebook, but it's usually just a comment like when I'm doing it live. And I do have all the information, which I don't really do on the live shows. But these I'm going to kind of do more like short articles. And I've been working on my Oddball book, but unfortunately with all the tariffs going on, there's no way we can get it printed because it would have to be printed in Canada. So I'm revising my book because I was doing it more like what I've been doing on Facebook, where I just make a snarky joke and then put the information. My publisher at Tomorrow's, John Morrow, said, I think it'd be a lot better if we could have more information so it's more educational, so nobody goes after us for printing their material. So this is kind of another way of doing that.
All right. Yeah, because you actually show the covers. So if they're in a book, I could see that. So when you do a live show, or like when you would host them, do you kind of like put all the comics out and like write a script or like write the right things to say, or you just have them and you just kind of freestyle it as you go?
Absolutely freestyle it. And sometimes people from the audience will mention something and I'll kind of put that in the back of my head, maybe to use sometime. But I really, at my age, I couldn't remember anything anyway. But I've always just reacted to stuff. I mean, when you're a cartoonist, and I write all my material now and always have done as much as I could, but I'd just rather do it like improv, because working as many years as I have, and I would say this has been the case now for at least 30, 40 years of the 50, you just kind of train your brain to come up with something funny and stupid at everything. And believe me, it drives my family crazy. I can't turn it off. I'm not on, but when I see something ridiculous, I have to respond to it. And of course, now I'm told I'm corny as hell, but corny's always fine with me. Why do you think I love Svengoolie so much?
I was actually going to make a reference to that right now. I was like, that's so true. Corny is awesome. Svengoolie is a master of that, right? And kind of like the name of even Uncle Dad, that comes from the corniness. I love that you say that. That's amazing.
I actually just did a comic book for Svengoolie.
Really?
And I designed a T-shirt for Svengoolie and a button for him.
Wow.
I think I discovered him when he first was on national TV about 15 years ago. And it was like, when I was a boy, I wanted to be a cartoonist, a paleontologist, or a horror host, or maybe a kiddie show host.
Yes.
And we had a local one in San Diego, Mona Lisa. And she was like Vampirella, but very, very, very hip. She wasn't talking about her body as much as just saying weird things. And her sign off was hilarious. I think she started in 62, and her sign off was happy hallucinations, honeys. And she was still doing that into the 70s. And I'm thinking, did you see my future?
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I can. I don't know if I ever revealed this before, Mike, but I actually, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a horror host too, and that's kind of the invention of the podcast, right? It's like to go ahead and be that kind of version of yourself. So I love that. That's amazing. Shout out to Sven Gulli. Oh man.
The funny thing about horror hosts was they never got paid much of anything. It was usually somebody working at the studio, and they said, this movie's 90 minutes and it's a 2-hour slot. What do we do? Hey, would you like to dress up as a monster and tell jokes? You're kind of a funny guy. We'll give you another $20 in your envelope each week. Okay. And then they found out they had to write it. They had to do all their makeup, but if you're a weirdo, being a weirdo on TV is fun.
Yeah, it's just being a weirdo on a podcast is fun too, right?
And so many of them are weird. It isn't too unique anymore.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, so people can go and check out if they don't make it to a con where you're doing it live or anything, they can go to that website and check it out every Saturday. 13th Dimension. Yes.
And if they want to see any of my oddball shows, I think there are quite a few of them up on YouTube.
Perfect. Yeah. Speaking of online content, you have a new title. Is it coming out or is it out on another website called Aces Weekly? This is
about a year now.
It's been out for a year. The Kilgore Home Nursing, which is like illustrated tales of different healthcare worker stories that you've heard, and they're all lightly based on true stories there.
Well, let me tell you. Let me see. In 2015, I somehow shattered my ankle. And in 2019, I had it replaced. Now I'm a robot. And I wear a prosthetic that, I'm not going to try to show it to you, but Big Daddy Roth Rat Think is on it. The only tattoo I would ever get, except I wouldn't trust anybody but me to do it, and I'm too much of a pussy to do it. So now I finally can have it, and no punctures at all, just losing my foot. But I was trying to getting it to recover for about 3 years, and it was kind of like this and that. It would be better and then worse and better and worse. And the nurses would come, and when they found out that I wasn't a creep, which a lot of creeps have women come into their houses just faking being sick. That was one thing I was told by almost every nurse I talked to said, I say, so what's the craziest thing that's happened? And almost every one of them said, an old man who's completely naked and I have to go in there and take his blood pressure.
Because he has to be naked for that.
Yeah, exactly. But everyone, they trusted me. They knew I was funny, so they would tell me their stories. So this is based on, there's one page that you have to guess which one's true and the other ones are bullshit. But it's amazing all the stuff they have to do because they have a job, unlike most of us, where you have to walk into somebody's house who is not going to change their behavior one bit because you're in the house. One of the stories is about this guy that fell down in Kmart or something and hurt himself. So now he's a millionaire and he buys all kinds of stuff he doesn't want, but everything is covered with cockroaches.
Mm.
The nurses told me, said, you have to figure out, where do I put the bag? I don't want the cockroaches to get into the medical stuff.
Was that Joe's apartment?
And many of the people that send these out, businesses, they don't get a choice. It's like, you go here. And so it's like being in the Wild West or in the middle of the jungle or something. They have no idea what they're going to see, and they just have to do their job and get out of there. So that's kind of the basis of all this. And I will probably someday do a sequel because I've got a ton of stories that they've told.
Yeah. Healthcare workers, I think, are some of the people that get the least amount of recognition and pay. And, I worked in a pharmacy for 9 years almost. And I got many of stories just from working in a pharmacy. And my mom has a nurse or kind of a health caretaker. And she'll come to the house a few times a week. And I know I have stories of dealing with my mom I'm sure she has stories of dealing with my mom. So maybe I can, if you do a sequel, I'll slide you one of the stories of my mom's caretaker house, and I can see if she'll show up. So I see you made a cameo in, or a version of you named Cole made a cameo in this strip.
Yeah, my parents almost named me Cole, and I said, I mean, I was born, so I couldn't say much about it. But fortunately, they changed their mind when I was a teenager. And Cole, they'd be calling me Coleslaw for the rest of my life. And the other one was they wanted to call me Rickshaw. That'd been just as bad, you know. So it's like Scott Shaw actually sounds like a cartoonist name. Simple, two syllables, both with the same letter at the front. It's like Jack Kirby picked out his own name for a cartoonist, but I didn't have to.
Yeah, and you're not named after a side dish, so that's great.
If I went to the zoo, I might be a side dish if I went in the wrong exhibit.
That's true. You also made somewhat of a cameo in another comic strip that I saw, which is more of your funny animal stuff, which you've done tons of funny animal, including Captain Carrot, which I want to mention. But this is more like a Sunday Funnies strip called Pack Rat and the Scroungers, where a guy that looks like you, but he's a mouse, named Roy.
Oh.
Roy the rat.
Yeah, I'm doing. It will be starting out in August. It will only be out in a tabloid, a full-color tabloid, 7 times a year. And it's called A Boy and a Comic, I think. But I'm doing this because it was something I came up with a few years ago and pitched as a kid's graphic novel. And nobody really looked at it because it wasn't about their ownership of their identity. You know, everything now mostly, they've got Captain Underpants and Dogman, but everything else has to be serious about your color or your sexuality or your whatever it is. And I understand that. I think it's great, but I really don't have, I mean, I'm as white as a potato, so I can't even, identify. If I tried, it'd sound phony. But this thing, I figured the real message of this guy runs a museum of pop culture. Actually, his mom is the one that runs it. He's just the curator because he trusts her because she never threw away his comic books. And this first story is going to be with a time machine where they're in a race back in time to try to get these collectibles before a guy gets them that just wants to save them for themselves and never show it to the public. And they all get stranded in prehistoric times and then have to work together to change history to get back.
No, that sounds fun. Yeah, the pop culture museum looks like a big can of pop or a cup of soda pop, right? Which I think is a great play.
It looks like a lunchbox with a thermos next to it.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. Then there's it's so funny. It reminds me of when is a few years back now. You brought back Captain Carrick, which you co-created Captain Carrick.
Yeah, with Roy Thompson. Yeah, the two of us came up with the whole thing.
And you brought that book. You brought back a few years ago, and he's at San Diego Comic-Con, but you spell it Sandy, Sandy, Eggo, like an Eggo waffle, which I thought you're really great at coming up with those kind of fun.
Actually, that one was Bill Morrison and I wrote that one, and I drew it, but I think that was Bill's idea.
Well, kudos to Bill. He's I know he's a good friend of yours, and also another amazing artist who we've had on the show in the past.
Yeah, he's terrific.
So yeah, and I think the website I looked, it's a kid and a comic, and so that how often will that surface up there for people?
Well, only 7 times a year, so I'll have plenty of time to do them. If I was doing it weekly, I'd be in trouble.
So when you work on stuff, Scott, do you work on one thing until it's done, or do you kind of work on it a little and then work on something else and just kind of cycle out what you're feeling at the time? Or how's that work for you?
I kind of juggle it so I'm not bored on anything. Yesterday, I was actually this morning too, I was working on that cover for the new collection of my Sonic the Hedgehog books. But at the same time, I was working on the thing for 13th Dimension. And I've got a couple other projects coming up too. I'm working on a project for Eric Larson. It's I did a backup story with, it was kind of little Archie. I always loved the little Archie comics when I was a kid, and Bob Bowling really was a great artist and a terrific writer too. So I thought I always liked Eric's stuff, because not the original stuff as much as when he really started getting into it, like maybe 50 issues in, he started experimenting. I remember about 2 years in a row, it was all kind of he was in another world that was obviously Commandy's world, but he just didn't have Commandy in it. And so I liked the fact that he experimented around a lot. So I thought, what if there was a little kid version of, not really him, but looked like called Little Dragon. So I did an 8-page story, and he contacted me last year and said, would you like to do a whole comic of it? I said, sure. He said, well, you're not going to get paid. It's not going to sell much. I said, I don't care. Can you pay me in copies? He said, sure. I said, then I'll do it, because that way I'll have something to sell at the shows. So I've got that, starting to pencil it. I do the work on that every couple of days too. Juggling the stuff, I never get bored that way. And it's always nice too to kind of step back from something. When you look at it a second time, you see all the flaws in it, because you're working too close to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great technique. I mean, I think I do that in my work too. And yeah, when you just stare at one thing for I don't know, weeks, months, however long it takes you, and you don't step away and come back to it, yeah, you're going to miss something, because it's just kind of going straight from your head right to the paper. And then it's good to kind of take a step back and then see it with a little bit of fresh eyes. So that's really cool. So that I saw this sketch, and we'll put it up on our video here, or the pinup that you did that was on the back of Savage Dragon 228, I think is what I found.
Oh yeah, right
next to
giant hamster. Yeah.
Yeah. So it looks really cool, and I can't wait for that to come out, for that book to come out. And so, speaking of books, I'm going to show this again. Your book, Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories, about fandom, underground culture, the comics industry, talking animals, a gonzo cartoonist, and of course, other stuff. And I love this book. But one of the things I love about it is that I never knew that you had this whole gonzo cartoonist stage in your life. And I love Hunter S. Thompson, definitely dressed up as some form of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas many times at Comic-Con, and also tried to replicate his actions. I don't recommend that too much at Comic-Con when you're working. I noticed in there you had a promo poster, and it's for this thing, what was called MondoCon, where it says you have a guest of honor is Hunter S. Thompson. But that wasn't real.
No, it was what we wished would happen. I'll tell you something. I always read Rolling Stone. And when he started writing for Rolling Stone with the illustrations by Ralph Steadman, it really caught my eye. And I realized, yes, he is a maniac. Yes, he's on some kind of drug or alcohol all the time. But he was one of the best writers I've ever seen. When he mentioned in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, my heart feels like an alligator. That was all I needed. And I was handing it out to my friends. Some of them weren't druggies, some of them were. And in the early days of Comic-Con, gonzo-ness, it was like gonzo fandom. Out of that, I did a whole Hunter Thompson underground comic with different people. I think Rick Geary, that was the first time he was published in a comic. We were just all so fascinated by him. And frankly, I think we were probably lucky never to have met him, because from what I hear, he was not very friendly when fans would come up to him. But he had a huge influence on my writing, especially. And I wish he would come back right now, because we need a weapon like him right now.
Yeah, don't we ever, man? I would love to see how he would have come at some of the nonsense that's going on. Yeah. I was going to ask if you ever met him, but it sounds like no. And
I did meet Ralph Steadman, though. And Ralph was
how was that?
Guy. He was a guest at a National Cartoonist Society weekend in Chicago. And the weather was very bad, and we were stuck in the airport for a while before our plane could even take off. And Kirby noticed, hey, there's Ralph Steadman and his wife. So I went over and I said, hey, would you like to go to this pub? Now, I'm not a drinker, but if I can get with somebody that likes to go have a few beers, and I pick up the tab. And the nicest thing about him was he was interested in talking to me and about Hunter, but he was really focused on our son Kirby, who at the time was about 14, because he kept telling him, "You got to watch out, or you'll be war fodder. You know, it's like I don't want you to get drafted. I don't want to see you in war." And I mean, a lot of stuff was teetering around that time, as it usually is. But the fact that he was so interested in informing Kirby, a stranger really, that he didn't want to see him fall under because America was not being run right.
Right. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting that was like his focal point there in hanging with you guys. But his art is also, I mean, it's great. It's so like the stuff that he does, the way he interprets buildings and perspective. Yeah, it's so fun to look at.
Yeah, I've got it. After I did that Fear and Laughter comic, I sent him a copy because I sent something out asking if I could use a piece of his art, and he never responded. So I went ahead and didn't use it. And I've got it. I won't try to show it to you, but it's up on the wall in front of me. And he wrote it in his style with a pen, and it's like big globs of ink, like clots of blood. And if you flip the page over, it's almost black all over, like he was working in a puddle of ink while he was doing it.
Wow. So wait, let me get it right. You asked if you could use some of his art, and then he sent you art?
No, this was after I sent him the comic, the results, without stuff in him, just to say, well, you know, we missed you, but I thought you might find this funny. And he went out of his way to say, it's horrible, it's a piece of shit and everything, but he wrote a long letter about it, obviously as a joke.
That's fun.
Yeah, he had a
That's
really
cool.
good sense of humor.
Well, like, well, how about there's another person that you mentioned in your book and that you did looks like you did work with, was Todd Rundgren, then did for this onomatopoeia strip.
No,
I guess
although I did have the rights to print it as a book, but I didn't have the money to do it, so I couldn't. I did this for the last issue of Critters, which was a comic that Fantagraphics was doing. And I thought, well, you know, Todd was one of the few musicians that's really a guy that I always thought the first time I heard his record about things other than love was like, you know, we're really on the same frequency. And still love his work. Met him a couple of times. But I just did this because it was perfect for a comic book, because onomatopoeia is all about sound effects. There's very few lyrics in the song other than bink, bonk, boink, meow, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and in comics, when there is a sound effect, it's usually really illustrated in some great graphic text type of way. And so, yeah, you have panel after panel of a sound effect and what it looks like if you were to draw it, and it's so great. And
well, thanks. Every page is 16 panels too, a 5-page story, just to cover it all.
Scott, what are your top 3 onomatopoeias? We like to Uncle Dad and I like to ask what are top 3s here, and I feel like it's fitting.
I was totally thinking that too. And man, we're like all in sync today, because I was thinking that too. I was like, Mike better ask that, please.
I don't know if I have any favorites. They'd probably be dirty.
I mean, that's okay. I mean, we're all a little dirty here.
You'll have to get me next time. I'll have to sit and think about it.
Okay, yeah. Maybe let us know and we'll put it in our show notes or something. But there's so much other There's so much other cool stuff in this book, and I highly recommend it. Yeah, the turd monster that you mentioned is in here. A lot of autobiographical stuff that you've done. There's a big warthog thing called Pigfoot, which I think is hilarious. You even have a drawing that you did for a friend of the friend who's a hairstylist who often goes to Burning Man. And I go to Burning Man. Finally got Uncle Dad to go to Burning Man last year. Did you ever toy with the idea of going to Burning Man with your friend?
I've never been that brave.
Although, I don't know, it sounds like early Comic-Con days might have been close to Burning Man. I mean, you guys sounded like you were having a lot of fun.
I'll tell you something. I took the job. Everybody had different jobs that worked on the show. I was the publicist. Therefore, I could get all the posters and artwork stuff for the program book done long before the show. And at the show, there were lots of fun things going on, just like every place else in America, maybe not in Utah, but it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. People were having sex in the pool. I met Klebon because we both were standing in the same line for a guy that sold really good weed. I dropped acid, I think, at the second one out at the UCSD. It was that way for a lot of us. We were getting away with the stuff we would have done even if there wasn't a comic.
Mm-hmm. I wonder what that's like. I mean, it sounds like you guys had a lot of fun, and it's fun to read your book and like see how you interpret some of these stories, as cartoons and cartoon strips. And so I recommend everybody who's ever been to a Comic-Con or thinks that Comic Cons are just nerds. I mean, it is true, but
if you'd like to read more about Comic-Con in the early days, I highly recommend this book. It is full of photos and art and cartoons. One of them just flew by me there because no one wrote this book. They interviewed 50 of us that were there in the first times, and a few celebrities just to help sell the book. But nobody agrees on anything, which is the best part of it because we all had different experiences.
Right.
It's thick. It is thick. It's almost 500 pages long. So I'll learn more about early Comic-Con. And by the way, people at Comic-Con really hate this book because we do talk about fucking and sucking and stuff. And it's like, well, you can't change history, folks. I'm sorry.
It's kind of like that book, the Howard Zinn, The People's History of America. This is like the People's History of Comic-Con. And the name of the book, for those that are just doing the audio here, it's See You at Comic-Con. I'm going to go and look this book up. Yeah, and so your book also too, though, it's about you and it's about your art and your kind of your path and how you came to be who you are and all the things you worked on. I feel like it's also kind of a history book of comics and of Comic-Con and like the industry and the progression of the industry. And you tell those things so well, and you love the industry. I mean, it's obvious you love what you do. And I think how kind you are to people when I see you at conventions and how you give everybody time to talk and you listen. And I know you do your best to remember, which I do as well. But I really, I'm honored to know you in the way I do, Scott, and to have some original art from you. I even have an original, I don't know if you remember, a Captain A-Hole sketch that you did for me years ago.
Yeah.
I still have that. So thank you for being you, and thank you for still showing up. And, even with your robo leg, which I know maybe not is easy to manage all the time, but it's really cool.
Well, and frankly, I'm doing pretty well. I'm driving again. Went over and took 2 big boxes over to the post office the other day because I'm going to a show in Canada in 3 weeks. So I'm doing about as well as can be expected for a guy my age.
You're the busiest.
An era where medicine is so good that they can fix things. I've got a pacemaker. I've got something to read my numbers for my diabetes. I've got something near my heart so I don't have to take blood medicine so I don't get blood clots. I mean, I wouldn't be around if it wasn't for having good doctors.
Yeah. Well, thanks to those doctors. And you're going to Canada. I know you might just want to stay there, but please come back because we will miss you if we don't see you at Comic-Con.
Well, they'll probably throw me out anyway, so
So your book, comic, do you have something to say, Uncle Dad?
You go ahead. I'll save it for the end. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say Scott Shaw's Comics and Stories, I'll show it here again, is available on Amazon, and I would guess anywhere books are sold, correct?
It's actually through Amazon mainly.
Yeah.
Some comic stores have it, but I always have them if I'm at any show.
Yeah. That's where I got mine at San Diego last year.
Yeah, it's a monopoly of me.
Well, and it's great because it's got all kinds of stuff. And, if you love comics, I mean, it covers so much ground in the comic book world. Yes, Uncle Dad. No. Okay. I've got one more thing to say that,
Oh, go
that
ahead,
I
please.
found. I found one more thing in here, Scott, that I think could be also a great T-shirt is "Eat shit, it's organic." When you had
Yes.
a shit monster in there.
Yep. I do sell T-shirts.
Yeah.
Nobody
Can
buys
we
them
get that?
out.
Can we get that T-shirt? Is that T-shirt available?
It's available. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I'm getting it.
I've got all kinds of illegal stuff up for sale.
Illegal stuff. Wow.
Let's
I
talk about illegal.
Yeah,
legal stuff at home.
that's where I come into play.
It's legal now, so I can't do much about it.
Oh, there you go. Hey, I wanted to ask a question that we have not asked in a very long time. So, Scott, just so you know, we are celebrating our road to 5 years. We're celebrating our 5-year anniversary very soon. And a question: this podcast kind of started as a comic book podcast, and what we used to do, we used to ask, and we have not asked this question probably in 2 or 3 years, huh, Mike?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Yeah. So, Mike, sorry, not Mike, Scott. If you could recommend any comic book that's not yours for our audience to read, what would you recommend?
I would say The Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers by Gilbert Shelton.
Okay. I'm going to put a picture of it right here.
Gilbert Shelton and Jack Kirby are my two, not only favorite artists, but my two biggest influences.
It's amazing.
The Freak Brothers are probably the funniest comics I've ever read.
Okay. There you have it, folks. Mike, I will let you bid us adieu.
Yes. So I had another idea for a shirt. Scott, what do you think of this? Comic-Con. Bring back fucking and sucking. Do you think that would fly? Could you sell that at the table there?
It might drive people away, actually.
But yeah. That Justin might come and ask you to take it down.
That's right.
Scott, man, thank you so much for coming on. I know you've got tons of stories, and we barely scratched the surface of the stuff that you could probably tell us. But where can the audience find you, follow you on the social medias and websites and all the things, please?
Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I also have my own site called ScottShawCartoons.com. So, and that shows a lot of stuff I've been working on. So I'd say that's the best. And if anybody wants to contact me and I'll give you my email.
There you go.
Do it through
And
Facebook,
I have one.
Instagram. I also
I've got
take
one.
by the way.
Yes, that's right. You do take commissions. I will show my Captain A-Hole commission when we air this episode. But I have one last question before we let you go. Why the exclamation point? Other than you're awesome, and maybe that's all it is. But why the exclamation point on at the end of your name? Because I think your Instagram handle is Scott Shaw spelled out exclamation point.
I started doing that when I was about 11 years old. That was when a lot of movies like Hatari and especially Dinosaurus had an exclamation point at the end. It was also in the days when comic books, every sentence, no periods. It was either a question mark or an exclamation point, because the printing was so crappy that there were big chunks of wood in the paper, as you've seen in comics from the 50s and 60s. So they wanted to make sure the kids could read them. But I just thought, this shows how excited I am about comics. Of course, everybody else just assumed I had a massive ego, which I guess you have to have if you're willing to get people to give you money for lines on paper. But I actually once got a job that whoever it was couldn't remember my name, but he asked around for the guy with the exclamation point. And I got the gig. So I figure, if nothing else, that might happen again.
They're like, this guy looks excited to draw. He has an exclamation point on his name. Let's hire him. Very good. Right on, Scott. Well, thanks again, man. And I will see you. I guess you'll be at San Diego this year. Yes.
Yes.
Well, if you guys are going to Comic-Con, look up Scott Shaw in the book and find out where his table is. He's usually in the same place each year.
I'm in Hall A. I think I could even tell you the table. But yes, I'm on the opposite side of Hall H for everybody. That's the easiest way.
There you go. And we will come say hello to you there as well. Always good to see you.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody. And Uncle Dad, do you want to close this out for us with your wonderful phrase?
It's actually our wonderful phrase, but you know what? Hey, Mike, let's do it together in sync. Are we ready? 1, 2,
I don't know.
3. We're not uncles.
We're not uncles.
Dads.
We're not dads.
We're just someone
you can talk to. That was weird.
That was super weird. But guess what? We'll see you all next week.